You're listening to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast, episode 274. Welcome to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. I'm your host, Paula Price, lawyer turned certified executive coach. This podcast was created to empower women lawyers just like you to create a life and practice you love. Join me every week for a break from the hustle so we can focus on you, what you truly want, and how you can create it. If you're over the overwhelm, done with putting out fires, and ready to redefine success on your own terms, you're in the right place. Ready for today's episode? Let's dive in. Have you ever noticed that when you take a trip, when you travel to somewhere you've never been before, you end up having these experiences. You meet people, you try new restaurants, you go on adventures, and you learn lessons that you carry with you, not just in that vacation, that adventure, but with you in other areas of your life. Today's episode is all about sharing some of the amazing lessons that I learned while traveling last week and the week before in Mexico City with my daughter and my husband. Now, if you are a follower of the podcast, then you may have listened to my episode last summer that followed on our trip to Paris. And there were a number of takeaways that I had then. And as we were traveling this year, I thought, wow, there's all these really cool experiences. I really want to share them on the podcast because I think they are relevant in your day-to-day and also relevant to your legal practice. So I'm going to share 4 lessons with you. And before I do that, I just want to highlight how incredible Mexico City is. If you have never been, I strongly encourage you to put it on your bucket list of incredible places to visit. The people, the architecture, the food, the vibe, it is absolutely breathtaking and amazing. I did a fair bit of research, not a ton, but in the weeks that led up to our trip, I did a fair amount of research. And I think it was in a YouTube video, somebody described Mexico City as everything all at once. And 100%, that was my experience of Mexico City. There are beautiful neighborhoods with tree-lined streets. And I don't like to compare cities. I don't want to say this is the Europe of Mexico, but it kind of felt like that, a more European style architecture. There are parks, huge parks. Again, not to draw comparisons, but the Central Park of Mexico City. There's Chapultepec Park, where you have this enormous park in the middle of the city with museums and this gorgeous castle that overlooks the city. The food is absolutely incredible and such a broad range, from street tacos that are absolutely delicious to Michelin star rated restaurants, all levels, all delicious. There are pockets of the city that are very historical. So you can go to the old part of the city where they've got these impressive squares and monuments and a blend of all the different cultures that have influenced the development of the city of Mexico. So you see Spanish influence, you see Turkish influence. They've got this very famous way of preparing pork pastor. It's a taco, and the way they cook the pork is like a shawarma, so that sort of spit that rotates next to a heater. And instead of it being the shawarma that you may have seen in shawarma shops, it cooks this pork pastor that gets sliced off and served up in tacos. So the point being, it is just this absolutely cosmopolitan, super varied city with so much to offer. I mean, in addition to that, there were pyramids. So we spent a day out doing a hot air balloon ride over the pyramids. It was absolutely breathtaking. It leaves you speechless. And so I absolutely recommend, if you're interested in doing a trip somewhere and you haven't yet been, absolutely go ahead and do that. So for today's lessons, I've boiled it down to 4 things that I thought would be most relevant to sharing with you in this episode. So we're going to start with number 1. And the lesson there is that it really pays to invest in help. What do I mean by that? When planning for this trip to Mexico City, I've never been there. The only experience I've had in Mexico has been in resort towns, which really doesn't scratch the surface of what Mexico has to offer, if you ask me. So I wanted to really get into the food. That's something that I'm really interested in. It's something that my daughter is really interested in. And at the first part of the trip, it was my daughter and me. My husband joined us about halfway through. So to start out with, day one, we did a tour of basically taco restaurants. It was a mix of that in the Old Town in Mexico City. And day two was a cooking lesson. And what was absolutely fascinating is in day one, we were taken by a guide through 5 different eating establishments in the heart of the historic part of Mexico City. And what was so amazing was that we went through a number of different eating establishments at all ranges of cuisine. So we started out with super, super casual and pretty touristy. Then we went to more of a specialized taco place. It was like turkey tacos with a special type of sauce. The third place we went to was more of a local place. So a place I never would have found on my own that served absolutely delicious tacos. The fourth place was a Michelin star restaurant where we had sort of an appy and sampled some of the mezcal and another type of liqueur. My daughter had a horchata. She didn't have the spirits. And I just tried it. And then we finished off with dessert at sort of a nice upscale, but not super crazy restaurant. So you can see how there was variety. And what I appreciated about having a guide was that we went into places that I would not have had the knowledge or the confidence to go to without that person there. And because we had this amazing tour guide, I was able to ask all sorts of questions about the local food scene, about food generally in Mexico, about different types of food preparation. I'm really interested in salsas and how they make their different types of salsas and sauces. And so we had a very rich experience. Not only were we learning about the food, but we also had this beautiful orientation of the downtown or the historic center of Mexico City. So we were able to get our bearings much faster than if we were to have tried to put that together on our own. There was also a sense of safety that the places that we would be visiting would be places that we would be, good to try, right? I think for anyone who has traveled to Mexico or other places where you may not be accustomed to the food, sometimes it can be problematic. So I felt reassured that these were tried and true and places that Canadians visiting Mexico would be fine going to. So it was a really good, solid investment. And then the second day we did this cooking class, which again was absolutely amazing. A woman who runs a restaurant and who has deep, deep knowledge of Mexican cuisine was able to take us through some of the historical evolution of cuisine, like traditional Mexican cuisine. We learned a lot about how to prepare corn tortillas in multiple different iterations. And we learned about different sauces and salsas. And one of the coolest facts that I learned that I will share with you is about peppers. So I'm kind of obsessed with Mexican cooking right now. And what she taught us was that jalapeno peppers, which you've probably seen, these fresh green peppers, when you dry them, become a completely different type of pepper. They become the chipotle pepper. So if you've ever tried the smoky chipotle or the fresh spicy jalapeno, it might be interesting to you to learn that these are actually the same pepper. The only difference is one of them is fresh, one of them is dried. So the reason I am going into the food details, number one, I'm kind of obsessed with it. But number two, more importantly, is that my daughter and I were able to short circuit a lot of the hard learning we may have had to do in order to get to where we wanted to be faster. And really what those 2 days did at the outset was set us up to feel confident and knowledgeable about how we would be eating during our trip to Mexico, which for me and for my daughter was a pretty important part of the trip, right? Is exploring and really appreciating what Mexico City has to offer, some of it, right? And we were there for 11 days. You can't explore everything, but all of that was really fast tracked. And so when you are doing something new, right? When you are perhaps learning a new skill, if you are thinking about going into a different practice area, if you're exploring what it looks like to advance in your organization, when you need a mentor, right? When you need someone to help guide you, when you need specialized knowledge, and what you really need is somebody with expertise in a very discrete area. The goal here, the lesson here is find someone who can help you, because you will benefit so much from having somebody who can literally hold your hand and show you what you need to know faster than if you were to try to piece it all together yourself. That means hiring mentors, or maybe not hiring mentors, but cultivating relationships with mentors. It might mean finding a coach to help you. It might mean finding a counselor to help support you through some of the challenges that you're having. It might be seeking out lawyers or groups of lawyers with expertise in areas that you want to develop your knowledge. So find your mentors, find your guides, find your teachers, and invest in those relationships, because they will help set you up for a faster, more enriching, and perhaps more enjoyable journey than trying to piece everything together all on your own. So that was lesson number 1. Invest in a guide, invest in teachers. So the second lesson that I am drawing from my trip to Mexico City, and I think this is really relevant to the way that lawyers are practicing now, and it's an area that I am going to be exploring more deeply in the months and years to come, is the balance between old and new. And so where this showed up in my trip is we were navigating a huge city with multiple different areas that I had never been to. And Mexico City has evolved in such a way that it's not a North American city where everything is on a grid, right? I'm in Vancouver. Most things are on a grid. Mexico City is much more of an elaborate and sort of, it's grown in circles almost. Like if you think of European cities that kind of grow out of town centers, it's similar to that. So in the area that we stayed, for example, Condesa, there's this park. It's called the Park of Mexico. And surrounding that park is this gorgeous oval-shaped street called the Avenue of Amsterdam. And it's basically a huge oval. It's gorgeous. It has traffic on 2 sides of a boulevard. And the boulevard itself is a tree-lined boulevard with a sidewalk in the middle. And I don't know if my description, it doesn't serve it justice, frankly. But what you can imagine then is that you don't have a checkerboard grid that you're trying to navigate. What you've got are these beautiful different nuances and differently shaped streets, which means that when you're trying to navigate them, it can be a little bit more challenging, right? It's not, walk in a straight line and turn left. You're navigating these circuitous routes. And so for me, what that meant was I needed to rely on different types of technology. What I relied on quite heavily was Google Maps. And also on the ground, right? Trying to figure out where I was by looking at street signs. Now, occasionally I would look at an actual map, but really I was kind of using these two things. And what was so funny was that when it came to the street signs, I found it very hard to situate myself. And it was only when my husband arrived halfway through the trip and I commented to him, I said, it's so funny. I never know where we are in Mexico City. I can never find a street sign. And the next day he said, I think I know what the problem is. The street signs are here, but they're faded. They've probably faded because of the sun. And sure enough, what he pointed out was that these street signs were like white with very faded letters on them. So they were there, but it was really hard to read them. You had to, first of all, see them and notice, oh, these are actually street signs. And if you get right up close, you can kind of make out what the letters are if you know what you're looking for. So there was that sort of, the old school method wasn't perfect. If you think of street signs as being the old school method. Now, on the other hand, using my Google Maps, I had problems from day one trying to find our guide for our food tour in the old center. My Google Maps were telling me to go in one direction, and the humans that I was interacting with on the ground were telling me to go in an opposite direction. And I'm pretty sure that my Google Maps were confused. This was confirmed or reaffirmed or supported later in the trip when my husband and I both took out our phones and his phone told us to go in one direction and my phone told us to go in a different direction. So I don't think I was making it up. It's not that I'm inherently terrible at reading Google Maps. It's that there was something glitchy going on. So if you think about the new school technology, I couldn't fully rely on my Google Maps either, right? And so if you think about what this means, right, there's this balance. And I think we're all treading this balance, especially as AI becomes more developed and old school methods are in some ways being phased out. There's this tension between drawing from what we know to be tried and true and well established, the equivalent of street signs, but maybe not street signs that we can't read. But you know what I'm trying to get at here. There's the old school, the traditional ways of orienting yourself, of learning, of doing things. And then there's this brand new way of doing things. And it's very convenient, but it's not always 100% accurate. If you think about chat or other forms of AI where you hear stories about not being able to rely perfectly on it, that's true, right? In trip planning, I use chat for quite a bit of trip planning, just big picture, what makes sense here, but always with the filter after of looking at the information and deciding, well, what makes the most sense? What is actually accurate? Doing a bit more of a deep dive to make sure that the thing I was about to do made sense in practice, not just in a chat thread. So here, right, there's this really clear example. I didn't want to be exclusively Google Maps. I didn't want to be exclusively street signs. So for you, you might think about what that looks like in your practice, right? To what extent are you relying on these modern new technologies because they are potentially faster, more efficient? They give you that big picture a lot quicker than if you were to try to do things in a more traditional way. And then also using the more traditional ways of learning, how do you support yourself there? What is really helpful, and where do you find that there are gaps on both sides? And ultimately what you're doing is creating a balance between the traditional and the modern and finding a pathway that works best for you. And interestingly, right, when it comes to finding that balance, one of the things that I found to be the most helpful is actually speaking with people on the ground. And, this kind of takes us back in a way to the first point, which is invest in guidance, invest in mentorship. I think it also highlights something that I believe to be true, and believe that to be true more so, is that our relationships are so important. And as we move into an era where there's more automation and the playing field in a way is going to be affected by the way we do things, right? The way that you practice, the more you can invest in the relationships you have with real humans, I think that's where we're going. So for you, you might think about, okay, what are the ways that you're supporting yourself, and who? Who is it that you want in your ecosystem? Who is it that you want to have in your professional world that, your colleagues, your clients, the people that you support, the people who support you, and also outside of your workspace, who is it that really matters in your life? So again, it's kind of looking at the different sources that you have, the traditional, the modern, and what does that really mean to you? How do you want to navigate going forward? Knowing that maybe the street signs are going to fade, knowing that maybe relying too heavily on technology isn't entirely accurate. What is the balance that is best for you? So that's the second lesson that I drew. So that takes us to lesson number 3. And this is kind of a life lesson and probably also a practice lesson. When I plan for a trip, I absolutely love and need to do some preparation beforehand. So this trip was planned in a relatively short time frame. I'd say probably a couple of weeks, really, from booking the ticket to taking off, which for some of you might feel like a long time. For some of you might feel like a short time. I think it's a relatively brief period. So what did I do? I went onto YouTube and watched a ton of videos. I bought a physical guidebook. I did some research. I did a whole bunch of different things because what I really wanted was to get organized and to understand what we were stepping into and what we wanted to see. And when it comes to planning, there are the obvious things: plane tickets, right? You need to get to and from. Accommodations, that is absolutely essential. And then from there, what do you do, right? What does that even look like? And planning a trip to Mexico City was fun. That was amazing because there is so much to see. So that meant booking things like the walking tour through the old town, the food tour that I mentioned, the cooking class that I mentioned. It meant booking the day where we went to the pyramids and did the hot air balloon ride. That is absolutely amazing. We plan visits with friends. So my daughter has a wonderful friend from her elementary school whose family is from Mexico City. They lived in Vancouver for many years. Now they're back in Mexico City. So we plan some time to see them. We planned different neighborhoods to visit, different activities. So the days that we were there had structure. There was some level of structure. There were some restaurants that we absolutely wanted to see. There were some things that we absolutely wanted to do. And so I like to have those things locked in because to me, structure feels safe. It feels predictable. I now have a reason to get out of bed in the morning because we're doing this thing. Now, on the other hand, is the idea of grace, right? The things that you actually can plan for, the things that you don't know until you're on the ground. And if I think about some of the most magical moments that we had in Mexico City, One of them was watching an electrical storm, right? Turns out this time of year, there are amazing lightning and thunder storms. And I'm saying lightning and thunder because first you see the lightning and then you hear the thunder, even though I'm used to calling them thunder and lightning storms. But there were these evenings where there were these absolutely incredible storms, right? The lightning would flash and then you'd hear this loud rumble of thunder. And because of the place that we were staying, we had a big patio and we had a big window. And we were able to see so much of the storm from the quiet and cozy security of our suite. We would have these evenings where we would watch the storm for an hour, and it was absolutely incredible. I couldn't put that on my agenda because I didn't know they were going to happen. Other magical moments, we were up at this tower. This is in the old town, Latinoamericano. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. And we went up the tower sort of at dusk. First of all, this is my daughter and me right at the beginning of our trip. It was incredible. We saw the most amazing views, and then we went down, had dinner, and then we were still able to use our pass to go back up later that evening. So we did that, and it was dark at that point, and the views were spectacular. But what was also interesting was that we saw this smoke coming from a fire. Now, this isn't exactly magic. I don't wish a fire on anybody. But we never could have anticipated that we would see something that was fascinating to see from up at the top of a tower. It was a warehouse that had caught fire. They managed to put it out quickly. There was nobody injured. But that's one of those moments where you can't actually plan for the fact that you're going to see this fire, right, in the middle of the day. Other examples were kind of when things go wrong, right? There was one market that I was taking my daughter to. It was located in a part of town that was about a 20-minute walk. We ended up getting there, and wow, the market that we were expecting a vibrant food court, and we walked into this dead food court. But we ended up redirecting ourselves, and we found this amazing spot that we went back to, I think 2 more times, a beautiful little brunch spot right on the border of the Park of Mexico, and it was beautiful. And so that we could not have planned for. And I think the last example that I'll share is another food experience where we walked into this fabulous food court, and it was a Latino American food court. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but basically Latin America, Colombian, Venezuelan, all these different types, Brazilian types of food. And we couldn't read the menu. We couldn't understand the menu, and there weren't very many pictures on the menu. So we ended up ordering our lunch, having zero idea what was about to arrive on our plates. And it was probably one of our best meals there, right? It was absolutely delicious. There was this amazing chicken. There were fried plantains, all sorts of really cool things. So the point here is that when it comes to your practice, when it comes to your life, when it comes to this balance of structure and grace, right? The things that you can predict and the things that you cannot predict, what we want is to balance the two, right? We want to put enough structure in place so that your day feels organized, right? This comes up a lot in time management. You want your day to feel organized, but you also want to leave some space for the magic to happen, for the unexpected to happen. Sometimes the unexpected isn't something great. It's actually something that's going to hold you back. It's traffic. It's something that goes sideways. It's something gets missed, right? So we want our lives to look like that. We want to be excited about the things that we can anticipate. We want to be prepared for the things that we can't, and leave room for that magic. So that is lesson number 3. And then finally, we're going to wrap up with lesson number 4. My daughter and I took a cooking course. I mentioned that. And one of the things that we did was learn how to make corn tortillas. And the woman instructing us, she was pretty detailed and very elaborate and gave us a lot of history about the relationship between the Mexican food culture and corn, all these different types of corn, and the role of corn in the traditional Mexican diet. And so we learned how to create the dough effectively of what you would use to make a corn tortilla. And at one point, we made our own tortillas. And she said to us that one of the questions that people will often ask when making a corn tortilla is, how much of the dough do I need for my tortilla? And the answer that she gave to that question was, you will know how much dough you need to use for your tortilla. Now, the reason that I'm sharing this with you, it's a relatively simple story, right? But it's one that resonates with me because I hear it so often. It's not usually asking about a tortilla, though. It's asking about something else. It's, how do I know if this is the right role for me? How do I know if I should leave my job and start a new one? How do I know if law is right for me? How do I know what to tell the client? How do I know what the answer is? There are so many moments in your practice, in your life, where the question appears for you and you want someone to help you understand what the answer is, right? And what this example meant to me, right? This example of making a corn tortilla and the idea that you will know is that you can trust yourself, right? You will know when the moment comes how much dough you need for your corn tortilla, whatever that metaphorically means to you. And the significance there is that there is nobody out there to give you the answer. And this is what our instructor told us. She said, I don't want people to think that there's a right answer, that there's one way to do it, that one person out there has the answer. Everybody will have a different answer, and they need to learn how to come to that answer for themselves. And so I offer that the same holds true for you, that those questions that you have where you want someone to tell you, yes, you want to have your guide to perhaps mentor you and inform you, but ultimately these choices are your choices. And what I would love for you to take from that lesson is that for each of you, you will know instinctively when you've got those questions and you're holding that question in the palm of your hand and you're asking yourself, is this the right thing to do? To trust yourself that you know the answer. So those are the 4 lessons that I wanted to share with you that come from this absolutely magical experience of visiting Mexico with my daughter and my husband. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope that some of these examples resonate with you and that they speak to you at the moment that you hear this episode. So just to recap, what those lessons are is number 1, invest in a guide, invest in your education, invest in learning from others who have been there, who have done that, who can help you avoid the speed bumps, who can help you avoid the potholes, who can help you move faster and more skillfully through the things that you want to do, the things that you want to accomplish. That is the first lesson. The second lesson is to find the right balance for you between old and new, traditional and modern. And what that looks like for you will depend on who you are, how you operate, your stage of life. If you're a little bit more old school like me, you might lean more toward that. If you're a bit more new school, you might lean more toward that. But there's a balance there. And I think it's up to you to find out what that means to you. The third is, again, a balance between what you plan for, right? The structures that you put into your everyday and your overall planning, and allowing space for grace and also other things that might happen to pop up along the way that you want to have some room for. And then finally, that last lesson is this idea of like, how much dough do you need for your corn tortilla? The answer is to trust yourself. Whatever your body tells you, whatever your instincts tell you, we want you to really figure out and learn how to read your own internal cues, how to reach your own conclusions, how to have your own methods of making those decisions, because those are skills that you will take with you that will be applicable and relevant to your practice and so many other big questions that you'll have along the way. So with that, we're going to wrap up for today, and I would love to reconnect with you again next week. I will be sharing some news next week, and so I hope that you'll join me for that. And if you've got any questions in the meantime, please feel free to reach out. I always love hearing from you, and I wish you a most spectacular week, and whatever trips you're taking, I hope that they are magical as well. So with that, I will wish you a fabulous week and look forward to reconnecting again soon. Bye for now. If you enjoyed today's show and don't want to miss an episode, subscribe and follow the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you haven't already, please leave a rating and review. Your feedback will help me create a podcast that's tailored to your needs and goes straight to the heart of what matters to you. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. If you want more information, visit www.thejoyfulpractice.com. See you next week.